Hello and welcome to Carved in Stone. But today it's less Mount Rushmore, more rubble and regret as we step off the mountain and into the dugout to talk Philadelphia Phillies and yet another postseason collapse as the Titans fell in 4 games to the Los Angeles Dodgers in the NLDS. We'll also discuss what comes next and who might rise from the rubble. I'm your host, Shawn Chabam, and today I am joined by my special guest and longtime friend, Matt Miles. Matt, welcome to the show and great to see you.
Hey, man. Great to see you, too. I'm happy to be here. For the most
Yeah,
part.
I'm right. Yeah, I think we're all still trying to get over it a little bit.
Yeah, we're definitely going through those stages of grief right now. I mean, I don't know. Are we at denial? It's kind of weird, kind of looking at what teams are left. And it's like, you look at it and they swept the Dodgers not that long ago. Baseball is a very fickle game for sure.
That is true. I completely forgot about that series where they swept the Dodgers and they just looked like they were going to own them. And that's not exactly how it worked out.
No, not at all. Not at all.
This podcast is not sponsored by, endorsed, or affiliated with the Philadelphia Phillies, Major League Baseball, Minor League Baseball, or any of their properties. Player images and team logos are sourced from Wikimedia Commons and are believed to be of the public domain or available under a Creative Commons license.
I'll reserve it for a little bit later in the show, but I really, bye weeks work for an NFL team because they're used to breaks, whereas I think baseball is very much a momentum game. And when you stop, it's very easy to lose that momentum and kind of break that routine.
I agree. I think the bye worked against them, and we'll talk about that a little bit later too.
Yeah, for the second time.
Yeah. Matt is for the listeners, Matt is a seasonal employee with the Phillies AAA affiliate, the Lehigh Valley Iron Pigs, with experience in several areas, including public address announcing and working the pitch clock. Real quick, before we dive into things, let me throw an explainer out there. This is episode 4.5. When there's a topic I want to discuss with a guest or something timely I want to talk about on my own, I'll do a 0.5 episode, which will often be more like the typical podcast you're used to and less mountain heads, unless the guest has a list he or she wants to share. So, Matt, we have a lot to get into today. Yet another Red October has ended in despair. There's so much blame to pass around. Casuals are laying it all on the feet of Orion Kerkering, and not that he doesn't shoulder blame for what happened in the bottom of the 11th in Game 4, where he inexplicably threw the ball home instead of to first base with 2 outs. But there's way more to unpack here, like the big three, Trey Turner, Kyle Schwarber, and Bryce Harper going 10 for 48 in the NLDS. A 208 batting average between 3 guys the Phils have invested well over $700 million in, and 2 for 21 in the first 2 games. And, even those total numbers, the 10 for 48 that I referenced, even those numbers are a little misleading because 7 of those hits came in Game 3 alone. In the other 3 games, that trio had 1 hit per game. So let's zero in on the biggest of them, 56 home run hitter Kyle Schwarber. His contract expires at the end of the year. Basically, it's already expired because the Phillies are out of the playoffs. He was a ton of fun to watch in the regular season, don't get me wrong. But his bat went ice cold in the playoffs until he smashed 2 homers in Game 3. By that time, though, the Phillies were really already a long shot to come back. Matt, do you bring him back?
It comes down to a couple of there's a couple forks in the road, for a lack of a better term on this one. My gut says yes, bring him back, because you let him go, that's quite a number of home runs that you're losing right off the bat. And there's not many other free agents out there that you can chase to bring that in. And I really don't think there's anybody in the farm system that's going to help with that. Everybody, we'll talk later. Everybody's talking about bringing, Williams up, but he's not a power hitter. So, if you let him go, I mean, what do you think the fair market value is on someone like him? Is he the Harper type money? What do you think? I mean, is he gonna take more incentive laden? Is he gonna take more of a deferred contract to stay? When you see his interviews, of course, they all say the right things too. In a loss, it's like, oh well, I want to come back, and it seems like a lot of players, especially Stott and Bohm, kind of rallied around. Certainly bringing him back as well. But again, I wouldn't even know what fair market value is right now for someone like Schwarber because of his age, and really he's a DH. He's a DH, and it's a very limited position in the league as well.
That's true. And for as much insane things that we see on social media, somebody actually made a really good Facebook comment that I saw recently after the game where he was saying how much he wants to come back, Schwarber. Somebody commented, that's really up to him. If he wants to come back, he'll take a hometown discount. I'm sure that his agent will have something to say about that. But he definitely can be back if he really wants to. He just might not get the contract that he could get elsewhere.
When you look at it, the Phillies do also have another pretty large group of players that are arbitration eligible too, that they can decline and just go to free agency. Bohm's one of them at 10.3 million. Marsh is 4.5 million. Stott's 5.8. Edmundo Sosa's 3.9. Marchand is right at an even million. You got Stubbs at just under $1 million. Luzardo at 10.4, and Johan Duran is 7.6. And even Tanner Banks is on the list too at 1.2 million. You add all that up, it's about $46 million. I'm citing, just to reference that, I'm citing a friend of mine. His name is Rich Wilkins. I've known him for a long time. He went and did all the math and kind of wrote a thing up. So you could check out his website. It's therichwilkins.com. And he kind of just does some fun blogging and kind of put all these numbers together. So I wanted to make sure I cited him and put him in there. And, when you're looking at, 7-8 players, and some of them pretty key into this run up to the playoffs that are all in arbitration, even if you say that, you want to bring Bowen back at 10.3 or slightly above, they'd be like, nah, I'm worth more. Could Bohm, have enough of this city again and want to leave? Marchand, I think you'll walk. Backup catchers are a dime a dozen. There's actually 2 decent ones in our farm system. Stubbs you can keep cheaper, and I don't think Stubbs is going to go to free agency. He wants to stay around. Just had a baby this year. He was actually great for Lehigh Valley. Loved seeing him. His batting average went up. A lot of the players actually spoke very highly of Stubbs, especially Marsh when they did their rehab stints, as well as Nola. Nola was very happy to have that sort of that familiarity back too at Lehigh Valley. And, I think you can, for $925,000, you could probably keep Stubbs around, or maybe you even it to $1 million, and that's not a problem. Duran is going to be a big question mark. What do you do with Duran at 7.6? He's probably going to want more than that, and I'm sure there's going to be other teams that'll throw more than that out there. Looking at the rest of the middle relievers, like Kerkering himself, the World Series gaff, you can't put that on him. Or I'm sorry, the playoff gaff you can't put on him. Kerkering has his own faults at a lot of times on these bigger games. It seems like when he's got runners in scoring position, he's kind of crumbled under the pressure. And it's not just in the playoffs. It's been several times during the season. If you bring him in a positive situation where maybe you have a runner on first, or you've got someone who's clearly starting to get tired out, he's been fine. That comes back to management too.
Yeah.
I think Rob did a terrible job this year on letting pitchers go 1 to 2 batters too long, and it spirals quickly. Same way too, as much as being someone who's worked with the Iron Pigs for the past 7 going on 8 years now. Dusty Wathen was the manager in Lehigh Valley for a good number of years. He helped them get a pennant in 2018. But Dusty's had some pretty big base running gaffes this year too throughout the season, and I kind of think it's time to really clean house more in management than it is with players. But circling all the way back to the Schwarber, I think we keep Schwarber. I wanted to go back to Rich's work real quick. Phillies have guaranteed contracts with Trey Turner. He's got a big chunk towards the luxury tax. Obviously Harper and Nick Castellanos is at $20 million. Just for a quick reference, you got Wheeler at $42 million. Christopher Sanchez at 5.6, and you've got Nola at 24.5, and then Taijuan Walker's at 18. Strom is at 7.5 with an option that vested. They owe a minimum buyout of $500,000 on Alvarado. If they buy out his option, he's $9 million if they accept him. And then, of course, Bader has been another lightning rod. We can get to him a little bit later. He's $3 million if they decline him, $10 million to keep him. So their guaranteed payroll is around 173.8. We're real close to luxury tax there right off the bat without even looking at trying to keep anybody. You've got Schwarber, you've got JT. I would try to keep Schwarber, JT. Ranger probably walks. Kepler, I don't know. I think I would let Kepler walk. Robertson, maybe you can talk him into a minor league deal. He's 40 years old, in his 40s, I should say. Walker Buehler is probably going to walk, and certainly Jordan Romano is probably going to walk.
Oh God, I hope so.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, the other thing too is I keep Schwarber. I try to keep JT, see if they can do some deferred contracts. That being said, you are right at luxury tax right there. And we haven't even talked about anybody who's got, chances to walk. So that's kind of where I'm at with the team. When it's all said and done with those pieces and those players, if you were to keep Schwarber and JT and Ranger, and let's say you're able to keep half of those that are arbitration eligible, you're into luxury tax territory already. And what does the team still need? Obviously middle relief, which I can talk a little bit more to with what I see in the farm system, at least at the AAA level for sure. And you certainly need some type of outfield bat or some type of utility person, because chances are you're probably going to lose. You're probably going to lose Marsh. You could lose Stott, which is a big defensive piece, although his bat's been kind of quiet. Even though he was great when he was at Lehigh Valley, he still holds the single season consecutive hits record for Lehigh Valley. But for whatever reason, his bat has gone pretty cold as of late. What do you do with Sosa? I mean, Sosa, someone could probably snag him for 7, 8. Are the Phillies going to match that? Probably not. And he's been kind of their go-to utility guy who, in a pinch, you throw him in, and he's been pretty admirable in performing. I mean, is he an A type of player? No, that's why he is where he is, and he's being paid what he's paid. But to someone, what do you do with somebody like that? I mean, do they bring Otto Kemp back, and Otto Kemp is sort of that person? Maybe. Otto Kemp had a great year in Lehigh Valley before he was called up. Was MILB Player of the Week multiple times. So, they have some options. A few of these lower tier ones that might be fan favorites like Bohm and Marsh and Stott may be gone. So what do you do to fill that in? You've got Kemp, you've got a few other players in the minor league system that could probably fill that role. And then turns around I don't even know. Do you have any thoughts on free agency? I mean, who are the Phillies even going to go after when it comes to bats or defense. What's even out there? I don't even see a whole lot out there that's under 30 that's worth chasing, because you already have a team full of 30 to really mid 30-year-old players. And, you want to talk about a window closing, you need to start backfilling that next generation of players. And I just don't see that in free agency right now.
Yeah, and that was one of the things I wanted to get to. Is there anybody in Lehigh Valley who could? I'm not saying nobody's going to take over for Schwarber. Let's say that nobody's hitting 56 home runs. If somebody can, I don't know who he is, and they're not exactly easy to find. But replacing a guy like Kepler or a guy like Marsh, is there anybody in the minor league pipeline right now who you think could come in and fill that?
So they brought Otto Kemp up, and I think Kemp is probably their best bet, from the farm system that already is up, and will probably be on the 40-man again next year. Decent bat, decent fielding. He's a good player that they can probably develop. Justin Crawford is the big name that gets thrown around a lot as an outfielder. The problem with Crawford, he reminds me a lot of like a Jimmy Rollins type of player at least Rollins hit more home runs. Crawford is not a power hitter. Crawford is your small ball hitter, and he's a base stealer. And, he's going to be one of those guys that you throw up there in the 2-hole, the 3-hole, or you have him at the very back end, your 8-9. And because he's going to get on base. He's going to hit those singles. He's going to hit the double. Very rarely is he going to hit a home run. I think he only had, in fact, let me just double check this real quick. I think he only had 3 home runs last year in the minor leagues. 7. Sorry, he had 7 for the whole year. So, when you're in AAA and you're only hitting 7 home runs, that's kind of a problem too if you're looking for somebody with power. A lot of the other iron pigs that we have, Rincones, Oscar Mercado, Brewer, Hicklin. These are all guys who are kind of career minor leaguers. They've been around the block. They're all in their upper 20s, lower 30s that haven't really, been up or down a whole lot. Excuse me. So I don't see a whole lot in the sense of outfielders that can fill that Marsh role. I think that's why getting Bader to sign is huge for them, and then figure out how to keep him healthy for sure. As far as like infielders go, Rodolfo Castro has been very solid for the Pigs, but he's been a career minor leaguer. He himself is pushing 30 years old. You've got Christian Arroyo's another one. He's one who's 30 years old. These are guys who you probably call them up in a pinch if you have some injuries, but there's nobody really who I see at the AAA level who's been kind of, hey, we got to get him going and get him up. As far as catchers go, Peyton Henry was with Reading a little bit earlier this year, but he's another career minor leaguer. But he's been very solid for the Pigs. And then they have they've got a prospect in Johan Escalona. Pretty decent defensive catcher, terrible batting. Is he going to be somebody who turns into something? I don't know. He's pretty young too. He hasn't even turned 20 years old yet. So he's certainly got another year or two in the minors. I think if that's somebody they can bring back and kind of work through Lehigh Valley next year, maybe as their starting catcher. If you're re-signing JT and you've got Stubbs as your backup and you let Marchand walk, maybe Escalona is the guy that you put in and kind of work him with some of these veteran AAA guys and see if we can get him up to speed. If you want to talk pitching, anybody decent, they either dealt or brought up. We could talk Painter because, everybody likes to talk Painter. Watching him several times this year, Andrew Painter, in my opinion, is going to be nothing other than a middle reliever. He's great for a run or two through a lineup. When he starts seeing batters a third time, they've got him. And even sometimes if he starts a little slow or something isn't quite right, they'll get him at the end of the batting order, sometimes as quickly as then. he's got some decent stuff. He's got some speed. I know he had the Tommy John surgery, and this was kind of his first year back from Tommy John. If that had some to do with his performance this year, he wasn't, like I said, he wasn't terrible, but for being such a top prospect, I mean, he was above average for minor league, but he wasn't, I don't think he's quite major league ready as far as certainly a starting pitcher goes. But if Kirkering goes, if Strom goes, I think he could slide into one of those long relief roles. If you got to run him 6, 7, maybe into the 8th, he could probably do it, especially if he gets, a quick 1, 2, 3 out of a 6th or 7th inning. He could probably to do a 2008, that Madsen bridge to Lidge role. I think he could probably excel at, but that's about where it ends with Painter.
All right, well, let's talk a little bit more about the pitching. I don't know about you, but I'm not too concerned about the starters. Christopher Sanchez has established himself as an elite starter. Of course, Zach Wheeler won't be back to start the 2026 season, but he'll be back eventually. Jesus Luzardo has looked great, and I imagine they lock him down. I think Ranger Suarez will get back to form, hopefully with the Phils. Who knows what's going to happen there? And of course, you have the Jekyll Hyde case of Aaron Nola, but you're stuck with him because of his contract, And you just have to hope you get the good version more often than the bad. I don't even want to think about Taijuan Walker. That said, the bullpen is where most of my concern is. You mentioned earlier, we don't know if Johan Duran is going to be back or not. Matt Strom's contract is expiring. After what happened in Game 4, you have to wonder about Kirkering's mental state moving forward. Is he going to be able to come back? Just what's going on in his head. I actually was a fan of I still am. I'm a fan of Kirkering, but you have to wonder, is he going to be mentally strong enough to come back from what happened, especially since there are, I said in the beginning, a lot of casuals are blaming it all on him. And that can take a toll on you mentally and emotionally. So you're watching the guys in waiting. Other than Painter, is there anyone who might not be on most of our radars who the Iron Pigs might send up, or are we looking at some kind of free agency to fill up the pen?
You're going to be looking at free agency. A lot of, like I said, anybody who is decent, they've worked in through the rotation throughout the season this year. When I'm looking at the Iron Pigs roster now, I mean, Adonis Medina was pretty decent for them, but he's also 31 years old. What does somebody like that have? Really, other than Painter, that's kind of it. Everybody else is kind of in that like high 20s, low 30s. They're career minor leaguers. They've been here, there, and everywhere. And really, that's one of Dombrowski's, I think, biggest failures as a GM is they have not really went hard on cultivating pitching prospects to the way that, to their credit, the Dodgers have. Everybody said, oh, well, wait till you get to the Dodgers bullpen and they fall apart. And we saw that in that series. But, it seems like in the playoffs they've run 2 playoff series and their bullpen has been fairly tight. And was it, the Phillies just being off? Maybe, but, that's Phillies were the second series that bullpen was facing to get where they are. They had a wild card series and then there was the division series, and we'll see what the Brewers do with them, I suppose. But, going back to the Phillies and their problems, it's been several years that there just have not been any sort of pitching prospects, Painter excluded. I mean, like I said, I've been with the Iron Pigs I just finished up my 7th season, excluding the 2020 season, for obvious reasons. But excluding 2020, we have not seen any real pitch. It's always been hitting. They had in AAA, it was the Bash Brothers. You had Rhys Hoskins and Dylan Cousins. They were the Bash Brothers, and they were just, beating the crap out of everybody by the long ball. And, you had Stott come through, and Stott was a big hitter. It's it's always been one of those things where there's always been focus on the bats and not on pitching. And that's been a failure with a lot of the GMs over the years recently with the Phillies. And unfortunately, I don't see that changing because there's really not much in the pipeline. It's going to have to be free agents. And I think that's, leading up to this point, they've always had the money to spend for free agents. Now, if you have players that you want to bring back, you're not going to have, you're going to have that luxury tax. To me, I've always believed that, okay, if you have a luxury tax and you want it, you're going to pay it. Just like in the NFL. All right, the cap is crap. There's always ways to maneuver a salary cap, when you're these GMs. But as far as, they have to look pretty seriously at, okay, well, what do we want to spend to get another arm or two, and where are they going to find it? And it's always been these, oh well, we get these cast-offs from other teams, or we get these career minor leaguers, and we're hoping that we can fix them or they get hot or whatever. And they haven't even had the coaching staff to really do that, because I don't know if you've ever looked at what in the minor leagues across all of AAA, I think AAA's ERA as a whole is somewhere around 5.5. So it's just so tough to find anybody who's a sub-5 pitcher, period, at that level. And it's just it's a bunch of guys, and it is what it is,
Yeah. So I didn't have this as something that we were going to discuss today, but as you were talking about pitching, and I think you were really more talking about relief pitching, but on the starters too. There's been talk that MLB wants to add teams.
Mm-hmm.
Well, John Kruk is John Kruk, and he went off on this. He went off on that one day. He said, how many bullpen games do we see? Teams can't find 5 starting pitchers now, and you're going to add 2 teams. It's ridiculous. How would you feel about expansion? I know I'm almost never in favor of it for most sports. I feel like it ends up watering down the competition a little bit. It's worked in the past. I actually think that the NFL is perfect right now at 32 teams, 4 teams cross 8 divisions in the 2 conferences. I think that works flawlessly. But with the lack of starting pitching, I think that it would just be an absolute abomination to see expansion. What do you think would happen? Or do you like the idea?
I do not. And, I stand with Kruk on that one. Again, I look at, they shrank the minor league number of teams last year or 2 years ago. And, you look at teams like the Marlins, who, sell out at Coca-Cola Park in Allentown, for reference, is 10,100. Okay. There were attendance figures with the Athletics, with the Marlins, with the Rays, that the Iron Pigs sold more tickets than those major league teams. And you want to expand. Maybe you're just better off moving those teams to a different market. To me, I think there's almost no doubt in my mind, if you put a team back in Montreal, take the team out of Miami and put them in Montreal, for instance, or take the team out of Tampa Bay and put them in Montreal. Do you need to have, in a state like Florida, do you need to have 2 teams that are within a 3 or 4 hour drive of each other? Take one of those teams, put them in Montreal, bring the Expos back, or call them whatever you want. It doesn't matter. I think they would sell out a stadium, pretty often, or at least you'd have much better attendance numbers than what those teams have. So expansion, no, definitely not for that, especially. And even when it comes to not just pitching, but bats, how many Mendoza line hitters are there in the majors? I'll bet you it's, the old Mendoza line of 250. I'll bet you probably can drop the Mendoza line to 225 or even closer to 200, really, when you look at if you put a certain number, put 50 starts, let's say, or 60 starts, you don't even have to do a full season, but do players that had 60 starts in a season, how many of them are above that Mendoza line? And I would be willing to bet that it's probably 40%, if that. And then you want to add to that, okay, not only do you have these bullpen games, well, you're going to see the same, and this isn't a knock on Lehigh Valley by any means, but you're going to see the same quality of baseball that you see at your local AAA stadium and pay major league prices for it. And sorry. So.
Yeah, the Athletics will be moving to Las Vegas when their stadium is finished. I thought that professional sports, when they started moving into Vegas, were going to. I thought that they'd succeed, but I thought that it would mainly. I thought that the Vegas teams would constantly be on the road because I didn't think that the locals were really going to support it. Vegas is more of a tourist town. I thought that you were going to see pretty much every single game was going to be overtaken by the other team's fans, and we haven't really seen that. They've really gone out and supported the Raiders and the Golden Knights. Doesn't really hurt when the Golden Knights came in like a wrecking ball and won the Stanley Cup, I think, in just their 6th season.
Well, yeah, because the NHL did their expansion. When they do their expansions, they do them right. Like, I mean, they brought in top-notch players from all over the place. And yeah, okay, let's make an all-star team and start the season. Yeah. I mean, yeah,
they were in the finals their first season, weren't they?
I think, yeah.
They lost. I don't even remember who they lost to, but I know it wasn't the Flyers.
Probably Tampa Bay. Probably Tampa Bay.
I think you're right. We'll have to look back on that. If that's incorrect, I'll flash a correction on the screen. But I think you're correct. So getting back to the Phillies, and you were talking a lot about who to keep and all of that. So as far as the money goes, earlier at one point this season on Schwarber, I said, "Give that man a blank check." I'm walking.
A lot of us
that
did.
back. Yeah, I'm going to walk that back. Like you said, he's a DH. He'll be 33 at the start of next season. His power numbers are not going down, at least not from April to September. But when you're getting to October every year and failing, I can't justify saying give him a blank check. I would love to keep him. Don't get me wrong, but I don't want to overspend on him. And I think now might be a good time to transition into this topic. Is the window shut? I mean, I don't know about you, but I see Nick Castellanos getting traded after all the drama surrounding him this season. We've discussed Schwarber. You mentioned JT Realmuto. He'll be a 35-year-old catcher, which is ancient for that position.
Yes.
But
he's also a unicorn at that position. I mean, it's
absolutely.
It's not quite apples to apples, but like you said, he's 35. What do you like? How many more years are you going to get out of him?
Right, and he was the team's most consistent hitter in the postseason. But I mean, you're not going to move him to DH if you have Schwarber, obviously.
Right.
At best, I think he comes back on a very short 1, maybe 2-year deal. I think you mentioned Marsh could be gone. Trey Turner and Bryce Harper aren't going anywhere with those contracts, but neither of them are getting any younger. And there are guys that I didn't mention. You mentioned Kepler earlier. My original question was going to be, is the dream over with this bunch? But it clearly is for the vast majority of them. I guess the better question is any window still open right now, or is it shut for the time being?
I'm ever the optimist. So I think if they are able to sign Schwarber and they are able to sign JT and they are able to get a little bit of something for some of these other players that are going to walk, I think there could be another year. I don't, when I look at the landscape of the National League, especially, I don't really look at the American League much until it comes time for the playoffs. So I don't really know a whole lot that goes on there, except for a little bit with the Yankees and the Red Sox, because, we're so close to the markets, you hear enough about them. But, as far as the National League goes, the Dodgers have that, they have the huge payroll. Okay. It is what it is with them. You almost have to chase money with them to keep up with them. The Dodgers will be back next year. Their window certainly is open for at least another year, maybe two, depending on injuries and whatnot. I was surprised at how quiet Ohtani was for the Phillies series.
Yeah, and then they put him on
because I was really
further.
Yeah, well, yeah, but
we'll talk about Thomson in a minute.
Yeah, and again, that's another thing. We can segue into that however you'd like, but I is the window shut if they keep the current management and coaching staff? Yes, because there's some, for whatever reason, they can't figure out how to process a buy, and they can't figure out how to close the big games. And that's, and then there's some other little things in there too. There's some other nuance with, okay, like when you've got a pitcher who's, you can watch it, and it's the fans, all the fans who watch the games know, like, all right, let's get somebody warming. Well, no, another batter goes through and gets on base. All right, well, now we're starting to get, maybe we'll get Strom up, or maybe we'll get Kerkering up, and there's one out. Okay, and then it just seems like there was no urgency to say, okay, look, we need to get out to the mound, be like, all right, what are you doing? How are you feeling? Here's what we got with this next batter. What do you need us to do to help you get you through this next batter? We'll get you relief after this batter. It's just they go out, hem and haw at the mound a little bit, come back, and then there's just no urgency with it. And it's funny. It's funny. You say it's a window closing. I don't think it is if you bring in if you clean house with the management staff. Now, is Dombrowski going to do that? I think it actually starts with Dombrowski, because there's been a certain way things were done with Lehigh Valley this year that I had not seen before, and that all comes from the top. Like, because at AAA, you're basically a puppet for the big organization. Okay, you're not making decisions for what's best for the Iron Pigs, so to speak, because they don't put value on pennants and championships and league titles and things like that with a AAA team on down. Maybe they should. That's another discussion for another time. We'll put that aside. But as far as what Dombrowski was doing, so the Iron Pigs going into their, and this, like I said, it's one of those things where you kind of see things happening that once the season's over and you start putting it all together, it's kind of like, all right, well, why are we doing things like this? So going into the AAA All-Star break, the Iron Pigs had I believe it was a 4-game lead over the Jacksonville Jumbo Shrimp. So there's a name for you. And yeah, I love it too. And basically what that would have, if they would have won, they split the season into half. So if the Iron Pigs would have led the standings at the end of the first half of the season, they were guaranteed a home playoff game. And obviously the management team that runs the stadium was all for it, and pushing hard. Hey, we can get this home playoff game in late September. They know it's going to be a sellout, make tons of money doing it. And right about that time, that's when Otto Kemp got called up, and there were a few other moves that were made with players. Weston Wilson, I think, was called up around that time. There were some moves made with the bullpen where some pitchers were going up and down, and all of a sudden, clubhouse vibes, whatever you want to do, whatever you want to call it, shifted. And I think Contreras, the manager for AAA, kind of had his hands tied. And I don't think Painter started any of those games at the end. There was a lot of things that were going on, and that's sort of heading into trade time and other things. And I think the edict came down from Dombrowski to, all right, we're playing the scrubs the rest of this into the All-Star break. And the Pigs ended up losing out that home series to it was either the worst or second worst team in AAA at the time. and ended up losing their opportunity for the the playoff team, the playoff game rather. So when you start looking at how things were operated and how things were going down at the AAA level already, that kind of soured, I think, a lot of, everybody talks about Stubbs and his clubhouse vibes and stuff. But again, we talked about it earlier. Baseball is very much a momentum game, and the Iron Pigs were having a record season for them and were one of the best teams in AAA. And they kind of killed that momentum. And when they started killing that momentum, it took the Pigs a while to kind of get back going again. And the same thing, they went on a run again in August and were near the top of the standings again. And then at the very end, they start doing the September call-ups, and then the team just kind of fell apart at the end and didn't even have a chance at winning the second half. So basically cutting back into that. So I look at it as, to kind of wrap up the conversation, the window I think is still open and put the asterisk on it. I think the big changes they're not going to come from players this year. The big changes are going to come from management. Certainly, do you keep Thomson? I'd like to see Dombrowski actually retire. He's, I think, 68 or 69 years old right now. It'd be nice to see him, hey, thank you for getting us to where we are. Let's get somebody in place who's a little younger and keep it moving from there. Please don't bring Ruben Amaro back. Just let's not do some Flyers syndrome on here and put people in management that just shouldn't be there. But we have a great, pitching rotation. One of the best in the majors, if not the best. Do we need pitching coaches? Probably not, but certainly, your hitting coaches, why do the bats keep consistently going cold? And it's not that the players don't have talent. Obviously they have talent. That's why they're getting paid what they're paid. One of the things that I kind of try to tell myself in looking at these guys who went cold, yeah, it's one of those, they are the best at what they do, but you figure they're like the top 1% of the 1% that make it to the major leagues. So you pay them to do well, but at the same time, it's such a small group of people that it's tough. It's tough to say that, they're going to be consistent and winners all the time. But that's kind of sort of my coping mechanism for getting through this right now. But yeah, the window's open. If they can change some management or change some management philosophy with Rob Thomson, keep him around as long as they can change the way he's doing things, or he's going to be on a much shorter leash if he stays, for sure. Certainly if they have a rough start to the season, he'll go the way of the dodo very quickly. But I think they've got to get rid of the, certainly hitting coaches and unfortunately Dusty's got to go at third base, and with the base running, there's just been some gaffes where really they could have, instead of, they probably could have been closer to a 100-win team this year. Certainly, during the regular season. And I think they could, have done better in the playoffs if you get a hitting coach who can get these guys through a bye and not have them cold. I was always saying I like the idea of doing the scrimmage game because I always said they should do something like that during a bye week, and I'm glad they did. My idea was to bring it to Lehigh Valley and have them play, have the starters play the Iron Pigs, for a charity game for the, I know they'd sell it out. Well, yeah, they sold 30-some thousand tickets to the scrimmage game. So yeah, they would easily sell out a place like Lehigh Valley. Especially go on the road to that stadium and play a game. Maybe that kind of gets them back in a rhythm, but at least that was a step in the right direction. I'm glad they did that. I think they need to do maybe something a little more serious, maybe open the whole stadium. Get a real feel for the crowd. I know it's a scrimmage and it's not the same as a game, but try and instill that, hey, you're prepping for this, but
Yeah,
I don't know. What do you
my dad said for years, when you have time off, that why not bring up some of the minor leaguers and have them pitch to them, because there's no substitute for the game experience, and these guys are used to playing almost every day for 162 games a year. That's 6 months where they very rarely have a day off except for the All-Star break.
right?
And
And then
it does
they're going
throw
for
off the
how
rhythm
much
and
in
timing.
spring training?
Yeah, right. Yeah, and I didn't even think about the spring training, but you're absolutely right. So it's more like 7.5, 8 months. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so I don't know. I hate the buy. I liked it when they used to have the one game wild card. Now at the same time, you're not going to go to MLB and say, hey, we despite winning the NL East, we don't want the buy. Make us play, make us, don't give us the free pass to the NLDS. That's not going to happen either.
Yeah, no, it's not. And, and I get it, because it's a revenue generator to have a 3-game series rather than a 1-game. That's all part of it too, obviously. But the other thing too with the minor leaguers is a lot of them will go and play in like the Japan League or Mexican League or any of these other world leagues through the winter as well. I don't know how many, without doing any kind of research, how many from the Iron Pigs went and boarded a plane, but there's got to be enough around that they could have put something together. In my opinion, that they could have put something together. I mean, you can't tell me that some of these guys who are 35 years old that are career minor leaguers, or even just do an invite, just to throw an open invite out, hey, come out, we'll pay you whatever to get here, and we'll give you $5,000 stipend or whatever to play a scrimmage game for us and keep our guys warm.
Yeah.
So,
and a lot of that's on general management, but it ultimately falls on Rob Thomson to keep these guys engaged, to keep them ready.
yes, absolutely.
So Thomson, he's made some interesting decisions as Phillies manager. Bryson Stott's bunt in game 2, while Castellanos, who moves like molasses, was on second, was one of those. Yeah. He didn't do Kerkering any favors in game 4, bringing him in that situation. To his credit, Thomson has had the team in the postseason every year he's been the skipper.
Yes.
Obviously, that's not good enough. That's not good enough for this fan base. We don't want just NL East titles. We want World Series titles. We've only gotten 2 of those. The team has been around since 1883. I've only been alive for one of them. So I was
barely alive for the first one.
Yeah, so. Right. So I don't know. I don't have a ton of confidence in Thomson getting the Phils back to that point. He did get them to game 6 of the Fall Classic in 2022. So I know you've discussed what you hope happens, but what do you think is going to happen? So taking personal feelings aside, what do you think that he's going to be back? Do you think that you mentioned that he'd be on a much shorter leash. Do you think that's what happens? They just bring him back and, if they go into a slump early, sayonara?
Yeah, I think ideally that's probably what's going to happen, because I think Dombrowski is looking at everything as a whole and like, okay, I've got, 2/3, 3/4, whatever arbitrary number you want to put at it of everything I need to get a title. And a key part of that is a steady manager. And I think he stays, but I think the rest of the coaching staff goes. Like you said, he's done quite a bit. There's not a lot of teams that can say that they've been in the postseason 4 years in a row. There's not a lot of teams that can say that they're averaging 90 wins a year for 4 years in a row. There's not a lot of teams that say that they've got a starting rotation with an ERA, around 3. There's a lot of stuff there there's a lot of stuff there that is good and a good base. Like you said, the other 25 or 30%, whatever it is, to finish the deal hasn't happened yet. What do I think happens? Rob stays, but he's got a short leash.
We mentioned your specific work with the Iron Pigs in the intro, and you've talked a lot about them. One of the things that you mentioned is that you have worked the pitch clock. You told me prior to filming that you noticed an error in game 3. Can you explain that?
So let me see exactly what I wrote to you here in that note, just so I have that straight in my head. I believe it was when there was an intentional walk, and I forget who it was, but Marsh was up to bat. And one of the things that we're told when we run the clock, at least at the minor league level, is as long as there is a bat boy or first base coach, whatever, if they're still gathering equipment and there's somebody who's not supposed to be on the playing surface, the clock has to stop. Sometimes the umpire will be like, they'll yell at them to hurry up, whatever. But usually I'd say 9 times out of 10, the umpire will wave it off and have us restart the clock. Usually instead of the 30-second clock between pitchers, it'll be either the 18-second with runners on base or the 15-second if there's nobody on base. Obviously, in this case, there's someone on base. So it'd be restart the 18-second clock. We get chirped in the ear. I wear a headset with the umpire who makes that call. I noticed, with that one where they ended up giving Marsh a strike, and then he ended up striking out that at bat, which I believe effectively ended that inning. Getting that automatic strike. I mean, he went they actually had a camera angle watching, and you could still see on the you could see to the right side. I believe it was Stott it was either Stott or Castellanos who was walked, and they were just handing gear off, and the clock had hit the 8-second mark, and Marsh had just stepped into the batter's box. With 8 seconds left, you're supposed to establish eye contact with the pitcher and be in the box and ready to go.
That's another one of Kruk's favorites there, is the eye contact.
Yeah, the eye contact thing. And a lot of times you get warnings. Now, for whatever reason, this umpire never called off the chain. Never called off and reset the clock, because there was still somebody, whether it was the first base coach or whatever, taking care of equipment, shin guards and the other mitts and whatnot. And Marsh wasn't quite at the plate fast enough, but I think he thought the same thing. Oh, they're going to reset the clock and move in. To me, it's an umpire judgment. Was it an error? Error might be a little strong, because everything is subjective. It's funny. It's like, oh, we have this pitch clock and it's rigid to a point, but everything is ultimately subjective and then back on the umpire. And again, working with the umpires I've worked with in AAA doing pitch clock, we have been called off or told to reset clocks for all sorts of things. And equipment on a walk like that, especially an intentional walk, really, there isn't a written rule for it, but the way that I've done it is I've always started it when the runner is halfway to first base. I'll start the 30-second, because at that point it gives the umpire time to make the call, process what they need to process, and then the player moves. There's a lot of little nuance with the pitch clock as well, that I can get into a little bit later, but for something that they claim is so rigid, there certainly is a lot of nuance and a lot of judgment that goes into it. And I think the umpire had some pretty poor judgment on that call that I think the Phillies left the bases loaded. And I think it ended up costing Marsh a strikeout at that at bat.
All right. Like a lot of fans, I absolutely love the pitch clock. It has shortened the game so much. I'm also loving the fact that you can only throw over to the base 2 times. And then if you don't get the runner the 3rd time, he advances. I watched a YouTube clip where I think it was in the 80s, might have been the 90s, but a pitcher threw over to first base 17 times. And, there was nothing to stop him. And then the runner stole on the 18th on the 18th pitch where he actually went home. But yeah, I'm loving those new rules. Not a fan of getting a runner at second in extra innings. But one one change that we could be seeing is automated balls and strikes. And we're going to flash a graphic up here from umpscorecards.com on the accuracy of the home plate umpire in game 4 of the NLDS between the Dodgers and Phillies. And I've got to tell you, it's way better than I thought it was going to be. 92%. I thought it was going to be way lower than that. But if you look at the impactful missed calls, they were gigantic.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of old timers, I've heard this time and time again. Human error is part of the game. And, I used to kind of subscribe to that theory, but I think probably Angel Hernandez was the guy who really got me out of that theory because, how bad his calls were.
Yeah.
But, I kind of got to thinking, we have this technology. Why not use it? We why should human error completely screw up the World Series or the NLDS? And like I said, I don't think that this is that bad, but when you look at the impactful calls, it's pretty bad. So what is going on? Are they using ABS in the minor leagues?
They are. They've actually used it, and they've done several iterations over the years. So I want to start sort of by addressing your comment where you had mentioned that it takes the human error out of the game, or the human element out of the game. And that's not 100% true, because as a batter or a catcher or a pitcher, you still have to decide whether or not you're going to challenge what you think may or may not be correct. So, you have that finite amount of challenges. Right now in the minor leagues, it was 2. So you have 2 challenges a game, you win, you retain your challenge. So technically it's unlimited if you keep winning. But you have 2. So, you have that aspect of, okay, is it something that I feel is egregious enough or that needs to be called? Yes. And I'm going to win it. And you have to think of that in that split moment, because you will have like a second or two to think about it. You can't use your whole pitch clock time and decide, oh, I'm going to challenge it. I forget what the rule is. It's somewhere between 2 and 3 seconds. So, and then the way it's set up in the minors is the catcher can challenge, the pitcher can challenge, or the batter can challenge. And teams have 2 each. It doesn't come from the dugout. It comes from the players on the field. So
wow,
that's
wild.
So there still is quite a bit of human element to it. And when they first brought it out, it was 2 years ago. They actually did full games in, they started in high A, but in AAA they did this. It was 2 years ago, where they did complete games where it was all automated. The umpire was there telling whatever it chirped. Okay, if the system chirped in their ear strike, they called strike. If it chirped in their ear ball, they called ball. And that was the Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday games in a series for the minors. They were all automated. There was no umpire input. And then Friday, Saturday, Sunday was umpire calls. And the umpire still would get chirped depending on what the call. It didn't matter. They still heard it. And then the players could challenge. So if that makes sense. So there's been a few iterations of it. And then last year, everything was, as far as like, I think, they call it automated ball strike. It's automated in the sense that every player scanned, every strike zone is different. So it's everyone's custom strike zone. So you can't, depending on how your stance, it doesn't matter. You do your natural batting stance, you're scanned, and that's what you're set at. And I think they do a new one every year at spring training for every player. With all that said, I would have put any of the AAA umpires this year up against any of the major league umpires in games to call. And the reason being is a lot of times calls were upheld. And that ABS system, when I was running video, like the video board for the Iron Pigs, I'd patch into exactly what their ABS system would show. And it would say, okay, if it's a ball, it misses strike zone by, 0.2 of an inch. Or it would show, an inch, or if it was a strike, it would show, hey, this is why it's a strike. And if the umpire called ball, I mean, it would be within that box. You'd see like, all right, well, half the ball was in the box, it's a strike, or like just a hair of the ball was touching the box, and that's why they called it a strike. So I love the system in the sense that it sort of standardizes the strike zone. Is, when you look at that graphic, the pink sort of circle that it shows there, that is what the umpire was using for their, how they were kind of seeing the ball. So it looked like there was a lot of high balls, in this graphic, and there were a lot of balls to the outside. Makes sense. I mean, you're trying to strike out batters. There's not too much inside, as far as like, in that missed calls box, so to speak. So, and a lot of the missed calls were pretty darn close when you're looking at them on this graphic. So, overall, I think it's the impactful calls are the biggest thing. However, with the umpires knowing that this system is, grading them on the spot instead of, seeing this sort of a umpire report card, so to speak, after the fact, they're getting graded on the spot. And these impactful plays, these missed calls that are impactful, basically, I don't want to say they disappear, but it's okay in that moment. You have to make that choice as the player on the field, whether you're the pitcher, the catcher, or the batter, is, all right, do I make that call? Do I make that challenge? And if you're in the bottom of the 11th and you've got one challenge left, you're burning that challenge. It's just like in the NFL with their challenges. And I think fewer, now with their sort of the automated, does the league take it one step further, and then there's a call from upstairs that says, no, they didn't challenge it? To me, I hate that part of the NFL's new system where there's the video, the people in New York or whoever's watching the video just immediately overturn something. To me, that does take out the human element. And I'd rather leave that little bit of human element in there that says, yeah, okay, I've got a system that'll back my decision up, or have a system that that system says, yeah, no, you were wrong with your choice. Either way, that's still that human decision. And I'd rather see that stay and not go completely automated, because if it goes completely automated, yeah, I think that's where things end. And I think the biggest misunderstanding, especially now seeing what's going on in the NFL, is people are going to think, oh, it's automated, things are going to just be all done by computer. And that's not the case. It's not the case. It is still on the players on the field. It's not even on the managers, which I think is great, because you've got a player in the heat of the moment that can make that call. And I think that, to me, that's great. Like, and then that adds I think an even bigger human element to the game, because now you've got emotions you need to keep in check, and you've got that split decision to make. Are you trusting your eyes? A lot of things there that are just so, kind of heighten those impact calls that are, instead of being missed because of an umpire, well, okay, you have the umpire human element. Now you have the human element of the batter or the catcher or pitcher. And I think there's a lot of stuff with these older skilled players that you're going to see them. It's going to take them a year to really adjust to that. And I think some of these younger players may really benefit from it next year. It's going to be interesting. And I like it. I'm a huge proponent of it. I can't wait to see it hit Major League. I really hope it hits next year. By all accounts, it looks like it's going to be unofficially. So bring it, man. We got the StatCast era already, which is amazing, because baseball is such a statistics game.
Yeah, and I do want to give credit to the umpires, because their job's not easy. I would not want to do their job, okay? I can't even tell you. I mean, it happens several times a game where there's a close play at first or at second, and the umpire makes his call, and I go, what on earth are you talking about? And then they slow it down, and the umpire was absolutely correct. And it just blows my mind how often at live speed they're able to make the right call.
Absolutely.
They really for the most part do a really good job.
Sure.
It's really easy for us at home, especially now, to look at the balls and strikes because we now have the box. So it's really easy for us to know that an umpire got the call wrong. But for the most part, I think that the umpires do an exceptional job. There are exceptions to that. I can name. They're both retired, but
Mhm.
I can name two umpires, and I'm going to guess you could probably guess who they are because if you can name and if you know an umpire's name, it's probably not a good thing.
No,
Do you know who
definitely
they
not.
are?
Angel Hernandez is going to be one of them.
Uh huh.
I'm not sure who your
The
second
other
one
one's
is.
retired. Joe West.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yep. Yeah.
Those are the
Yeah.
only umpires I can name.
Well, and it's funny too because those two, you know, before we had high definition television and before we, had the boxes and everything else too. I mean, they had a whole lot of gray area, and the umpire, when it comes down to at the very end, the umpire is in charge of the game, and they are the steward of the game, and sometimes they just get a little power hungry, and there's just if their players are chirping at them or whatever during the game. I've seen it too where they'll something that maybe they were giving them earlier suddenly goes away. And this will kind of eliminate some of that human element. I'll give it that. You're right. For the most part, by and away, the umpires are pretty impartial and are pretty good at getting calls correct.
All right. So to wrap things up, let's put a fork in baseball. Let's put a fork in the Phillies. Well, the Dodgers already did that.
Yeah.
But let's switch topics to wrap things up. So far on Carved in Stone, I've shared my Mount Rushmores of WWE jobbers, best concerts I've attended, Flyers, Goons, and State Quarters. Do you want to weigh in and give us your Mount Rushmore on any of those topics?
So let's start with concerts, and it's one that you and I both attended. Aerosmith and Cheap Trick at Wells Fargo Center. And I want to say it was what, 2002 or 2003, somewhere around there. Might have been a little
That sounds
later.
about right. It's funny. Aerosmith was on my mountain, but not that concert. I've seen them 9 times. So
well, the reason why that concert is there is because we had the floor seats, and I got a high five from Steven Tyler as they came out of the visitor locker room. So, so that's why that's my high five. That high five is why it's on my Mount Rushmore. The other 3 that I would put up there. I saw Kenny Chesney at the Link in 2005. I'd say Kenny Chesney is your Gen X version of like the Parrot Heads, and that was pretty cool to experience. Because also I saw Dave Matthews Band in 1997 at Hershey Stadium, and they didn't sing, they jammed because the singers lost their voice, and it was kind of cool because I didn't hear Dave Matthews going, hey, I just heard the band playing. And it was great because it was just like a big jam session and everybody was just having a good time. It was a really awesome experience. In 2006, I saw the Rolling Stones, and Rolling Stones are just an experience with music, with just their on stage performance, everything else. I mean, the Rolling Stones, any Rolling Stones concert, even today, I'm sure it's still the same. Like they're just high energy. It's all hits. Everybody's singing and dancing. It's a great, just an awesome experience to go to a Rolling Stones show. So that's my 4 for concerts on Mount Rushmore. And I have a couple WWE jobbers.
Okay.
You can't speak jobber and not mention, the Brooklyn Brawler, Steve Lombardi.
Yep, he was number 1 on my list. Yep.
Yeah, the number 1 there. More recent times, I would say Ricochet. He seems to be the type of wrestler that's always out there and just doesn't win a whole lot of matches, and he's high flying, and he's always had the the acrobatics and things like that. He's a shorter guy, and he's always fast, but always ends up losing. Tag team, Tucker from Heavy Machinery. I think he got the short end of the stick, although depending who you follow, I guess he had a pretty serious knee injury, and that's why he's not around anymore. But I mean, he was a big dude who could move. It was fun watching him. I guess he's less of a jobber more than anything else. And then I'd probably say, I don't know, would you consider Shinsuke Nakamura a jobber?
So this is what I like about your answers here is that I watched wrestling in the golden era, but I stopped. I was from like 87 to 94. I don't know who that is.
Okay. So I
so
watched
you mentioned a couple guys who I'm just like, I'm sitting here nodding, but I have no idea who they are other than the Brawler.
So I watched it a little bit in that same time frame that you did. Well, the Brawler was around, I think, through 2003 or 4. Anyway, I mean, he had a long career in the WWF/WWE. And then I watched Attitude Era for a bit, in college and high school. Everybody ran through the halls doing the DX suck it. But I kind of tailed off at the end of the Attitude Era for a while. And then my son got into it and when he was like 6-7 years old. So I've been watching it fairly regularly for the past like 6 to 7 years. And he really liked Ricochet, and I kind of saw Ricochet always kind of got the short end of the stick. Shinsuke Nakamura has had a couple titles and a couple wins, and he always flip flops from babyface to heel. And he's another one who's kind of been around long enough that I think they could have done more with him and really developed more of a story with him. But he's always been kind of like we're going to run him for a bit, and then he'll have like a universal title. And then they'll drop him off, and then he'll have, a tag team title to pair him with somebody, and then they'll kind of have him fall off, and he's doing some jobber matches again. So that's sort of my take with Shinsuke Nakamura. So
that might be
Flyers Goons. I mean, you had Barber, and I'd say he's probably number one. The Enforcer. Who were your 4? I'm just curious.
Well, so the way that I did it was I limited it to guys I've seen.
Okay.
So,
all right.
So I didn't include any of the Broad Street Bullies. So Barber wasn't up there. So I
Right.
wanted it to be guys who I remember. I thought the most obvious one was Craig Berube.
Yep. Yeah.
Let me see. I had Dave Brown.
Okay.
Donald Brashear and Dan Kordick.
Okay. All right. Stu Malgunas was kind of a bully, I guess, but.
So my next mountain is Halloween franchise films. And there's one movie that I personally can't stand, and I thought it was universally hated, but I've been looking at Halloween rankings, and it turns out a lot of people actually like that movie. I'm not going to say which one it is, but I rip on it sporadically through the already filmed episode 5, and now I feel like I'm going to take a beating for it. Do you have a favorite Michael Myers film or moment?
To me, I still say it's one of those few franchises where I think the second film is better than the first, but it's one of those things where I think it's gotten to the point where it's kind of like Rocky in the sense that I think the more they're doing, the more watered down it's getting. But that's kind of my take on it. I think the first was good. I think the second was the best. But I think it starts getting watered down after that. And I like the first Rocky. I think Rocky 2 is probably the best in that franchise. Just like I think The Godfather 2 is probably part 2 is the best in that franchise. I think it's one of and then you start getting past that second one and it's like, all right, it starts getting a little campy or a little watered down in my opinion, but that's just me.
Matt, thanks so much for being here and giving us a little insight on the Iron Pigs and what we can expect for the Phillies in the future.
I mean, it's great talking with you. Hopefully, we have high hopes again, and we move some rubber tree plants with these ants next year.
As always, thank you for listening, and I will see you next time. Go Birds!
Go Birds!